Right, so the wavy washer, bit of synthetic grease on that, just sits over the centre of that piece quite nicely. Put that piece on top, take the pinhead screw, run that down, do that up tight, check that the film reminder moves, spin that onto the rewind, something through the fork of the rewind to stop it turning, tighten the knob with your fingers, check that it moves up and down, job done. The meter dial, that could probably benefit from a bit of cleaning. Let's see what we can do with that. There's the screw for that. There's the screw that, there's a wavy washer goes in there. And there is a smaller wavy washer that goes in the top. That's good. That looks like a full complement of parts. Now I just need to make sure that they're clean. I'll test the exposure meter on this camera. It's quite normal for these cameras that are now 60 years old for the exposure meter not to be accurate. The selenium cells have deteriorated with age, and they're not coming back. The output curve, the output from a selenium cell was probably not a linear thing. It was probably not linear compared to the light level falling on it. It probably followed some S-shaped curve. That being the case, if the output has fallen, you're not going to get a successful meter by simply some clever trick like shifting your film speed setting in order to compensate. That's probably not going to do the job. I'm absolutely certain you can make the meter read accurately at one light level by doing a trick like that, but it'll only be accurate at one light level. It won't be accurate at any other light level. It'll be increasingly inaccurate if there's a problem with the output. And the result, basically, it means that if you're quite confident that you can recognise the light level at which your meter will be accurate, you don't need a meter. You've only got to remember what the setting was for that light level. So, working meters on these old cameras, yeah, it's nice. It's nice to see things swing around vaguely like they should do. But don't fool yourself that that's an accurate reading. Now that's a good starting point. That's where it started. I'm going to check that on my calibrated light source and see how that appears to be. It may be good, but as I say, that's less common these days. Well, somewhat to my surprise, that meter's not too bad. I would say it was quite a good example as these things go. Now I've got to put my base plate back on the camera because I've only got my base plate I use for testing the cameras on at the moment, or when I'm working on them. So I'll remove the take-up shaft, the take-up lever, advanced lever. It's 3 screws holding this in place. Remove those nickel plated screws. Now there's a spring under here that holds the capping plate, so you've got to be careful not to lose that. There it is, there. Now I can put the camera's base plate back on. And once that's on, I can put the leatherette back on the base, because we're on the home straight. The base plate's a bit knocked around here, there's a lot of scuff marks. Now that's because the screws were loose in that advance lever, and as a result it had been scuffed across those surfaces. I had thought that was the result of I thought that was a result of the cam here being loose on the shaft, but that was not the case at all, fortunately for us. Right, so the leatherettes need to go on here. But before the leatherette needs to go on, there's a little blanking plate here that needs to go over that point. So let's get a bit of paper. I'll put a spot of glue on that and glue that in place so it's not fighting me when I do the leatherette. Of course the leatherettes need to go on the front of the camera too, and from memory one of the leatherettes was pretty fragmented, so that's going to be fun. Its mate was okay. Now this disc and that disc there are simply to make the leatherette lie flat so you don't end up with a dimple in the leatherette making it look ugly. Right, and the leatherette itself, what sort of a state's it in? Oh, this one, yeah, this was the one. I've forgotten all about the joys of this one. This one was, the leatherette was in two pieces. And you can see it's got different adhesive either side of this piece. It was cracked through at that point. I'm going to have to very carefully clean that and glue this back down. So that's like decayed adhesive there in the main. Right, I think that's as much as I can safely scrape off there. I'm going to give that a wipe down with some naphtha now to remove any grease or dust, anything that's loose. Oh look, it's come apart now. That was where it was glued together. It's no longer glued together. Now that almost, it's a funny shape that. It's almost like that was cut with pinking shears. It almost looks like that was intentionally. Now this piece has to go on first. I can tell by the angle of that cut, that piece needs to go on first. This piece glues on top of it. So, a bit of paper to work on, I think. Right, let's start with this piece. Is that the one I said needed to go on first? Yes, it does. Just put some adhesive on there and carefully spread it out, making sure that all the edges are covered. Now, I've probably got too much here. I'll have to move some of that off. Clear off the excess around there. Get this in place on the body. That looks good. Now its mate. See if I can do the same for its mate and lay that down in place. That's really odd the way that leatherette is broken there. It almost looks like it was cut, but I don't know how you'd cut it to look like that. It should do. This cut should virtually disappear with a bit of luck, because there's no leatherette missing at that point as far as I can tell. It's simply snapped off clean. That looks quite good. I'll just give that a wipe with a little bit of naphtha on a cotton bud, just very gently to lift off any squeeze out adhesive on that crack between the two pieces. But that looks very good. That might need a rub with black wax crayon to disguise that break, but you'd have to know it was there to see it. The advance lever, 3 screws for that. Yes, I've already put a new rubber pad on there, because I think from memory the rubber pad was missing entirely. Just checking that the film advance does move. That's good. So the patch on the bottom of the advance lever, leatherette patch, oh, it's a bit misshapen because those screw heads had risen, hadn't they, because the screws were loose. The adhesive is quite thick. It almost suggests that the screws were loose when the leatherette was put back. The screws had never been tightened, so that this was glued down on top of raised heads of screws. It's almost got that look. I couldn't say that for sure. Just put some adhesive on the paper there and transfer it across. I'm going to want a bit more than that. When you're dealing with small bits of leatherette, it's easier to put the adhesive on something else and transfer it across on a toothpick. It's much harder to get a controlled amount squeezed out of the tube onto a small piece of leatherette. Right, we've got this. Now the leatherette does have a grain, and you can line up the grain if you're good. Yeah. The pattern on that's never going to look wonderful because it's had the screw heads raised up underneath it, which has stretched it out. But it's not bad. The back catch. The back catch needs to go on. Where's that spring gone? It was in my hand a second ago. There it is. It's hanging on a thread of glue. Here's my back catch. And the screws. I'll just clean these up quickly with a bit of naphtha. Alright, now assembling the back catch cover. It's always a bit tricky. It's one of those tasks that seems impossible, but you can do it. Get the screw up from underneath like that. That's in the long slot, the slot that's going to hold the spring. Get the spring seated in place against the screw like that. Carefully lift it over to the camera, lower it into place, and you may have to do this 2 or 3 times to get it right, because if that spring displaces and it ends up trapped underneath instead of running it neatly in the slot, you'll damage it if you carry on and screw the thing down. So check that it is actually right. It's worth taking the time. That's good. That back catch cover works just as it should. Leatherettes for the front of this camera. Oh, we have a disintegrating one here. It's more disintegrated now than it was when I started. Let's put that to one side. We'll do that second. At least I've still got all the bits. This one, that's all corrosion products and dried out adhesive coming off there, and probably some fibres from the back of the leatherette. It's most important really there just to get rid of all the crusty lumps. otherwise it won't lie down flat. So I'm wiping this with a bit of naphtha to lift off any grease or oil that's on this surface. Important to make sure that the leatherette's tucked in neatly at the bottom corner. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how much of that was lost. The camera just stopped running. I suspect that I'd hit a file size limit. But I've just glued this fronted leatherette and put it back in place. It's fitted down really well. Often the edges curl up on them sometimes. It makes it very hard to stick them down. Now there's something going on over here, and I don't know if it's adhesive that's got round to the front of that leatherette. Could be. Just looks a bit unsightly. I'll clean that up. That looks very good. And that brings me to this disastrous looking piece over here. That I want back on the camera. Okay. I've got to scrape the crap off the back of it. The dried adhesive, the corrosion. This is very, you can see it's fragmenting on me while I touch it. That's not good. Okay. This is all corrosion deposits, this white stuff here. Okay, I'll see if I can clean that with a bit of naphtha. I can't do as thorough a job on this side as I did on the other side, because this leatherette is just too fragile to clean it in that fashion. Right, I'll try applying some adhesive and getting this back in place. I'll get these two little pieces there, I'll just put them to one side while I get this piece in place, and then I'll see if I can fit them into it. Alright, with that adhesive I've left plenty on there and it's quite wet. Hopefully that'll help me when I'm trying to get these pieces pushed into place. Oh, the amount of cracks in this is just phenomenal. Right, so these other two little pieces, we need to get them in place. Make sure I've got a clear understanding of where they belong. There's a chip missing, I think. No, yeah, there's certainly something missing. Never mind, we'll carry on. We can always patch if I have to. You probably can't see any of this. Let's get that piece in there. Now its mate here. Goes here, it goes like that. See if I can manipulate these pieces into place. Piece needs to move down a bit. Okay. Well, that's not bad. That tiny chip of leatherette. I wonder if I've got it anywhere. I don't think I have. Wait, what's that? I found something. That's it. Okay. Let's see if I can get that in place. Well, that's not too bad. I'll give that a little bit more attention. I think by the time I rub a bit of wax into that, it'll be good. There you are, you'd never know. I haven't even finished yet. Okay, some final clean up on this. Once that adhesive has had a chance to dry thoroughly on that front leatherette, a bit more clean up and then we're done. But as you can see, that leatherette looks okay. You'd never know that that was 4 pieces, 5 pieces, no 4 pieces and a lot of cracks. Looks fine now. Right, next time you see this, it'll be ready to pack up and send home. Well, as you can see here, I've done nothing to that leatherette. I haven't put any polish on it or anything. I've just left that overnight. The adhesive has hardened up and it's, as a result, the leatherettes are stuck back firmly, pulled down tight. Now, you'd be hard pressed to see a problem with that leatherette, but you know that it went back on in at least 4 pieces. So, there we have it. Don't give up on leatherettes just because they're broken. If they're glued back, chances are that the problem will cease to exist. There won't be a problem. The base of the camera, of course, that base leatherette was in 2 pieces. You can still see the joint if you get the light to catch it right, but it wouldn't catch your eye otherwise. So there we have it. This camera I'm done with, and that one can go home to its owner. Its number one problem when it came in was that the shutter release wouldn't release the film advance and allow you to wind on to the next shot. The cause of that problem was the exposure meter. It was the wrong one for the camera. It lacked the piece of plastic back inside the top at this point, which would have prevented that arm from rotating and falling out of position. And that's all it was. So this camera has been sitting around for many years now, since the light meter was replaced, and it hasn't been properly functional since that day. I'm sure it worked once or twice while it was in the shop and before the man handed it back to the owner, but it wouldn't have taken long for that shutter release shaft to wiggle its way around to a position where it was not going to be useful anymore. But everything else is done. Focus is nice and smooth. I was able to strip down the viewfinder assembly, clean the screen successfully. Even better than that, I was able to get it back together again with minimal number of dust spots in there. It's pretty hard to get them all gone. Didn't lose the silver on the prism, that's a minor miracle. Had to straighten up the brackets that held the top cover in place because the top cover was shifted to one side. It didn't fit neatly into the chrome trim at the top of the camera, and this screw in particular was sitting up in the air because the little boss on the bottom of that screw wasn't able to centre into the top cover because it was just off centre by such a degree. The exposure meter, strangely enough, it's pretty accurate. It's a very good example for one of these. Certainly in brightish daylight conditions it's great. You know, it's well within half a stop over probably about a 5-stop range. So that's good, and that certainly is probably about as good as you can hope for with a 60-year-old camera. And this one can go back to its owner. I know he'll be pleased to see it. It was his father's camera, and so it's got a bit of family history to him, and he likes to have them all working. Thanks for watching.